Now available, the Max Out Mindset Volleyball video series. 7 PowerPoint-driven sessions taught by Dr. Widman covering preparing your mind for battle, max out your mind, and max out your team. An actionable workbook with over 100 questions. Over 45 videos from some of the best athletes, coaches, teams, and leaders in the world. Numerous lessons from some of the best to coach or play in the NFL, NBA, WNBA, and the NCAA to help validate all the Max Out Mindset principles. For more info, visit maxoutmindset.com.
You are listening to Max Out Mindset with your host, Dr. Larry Widman, performance psychiatrist and elite mindset coach to women in sports, business, and life.
Welcome to the Max Out Mindset podcast. This is your host, Dr. Larry Widman, sometimes known as Doc in the mindset world. I always say, I like to tell you my definition of maxing out, and that's given the talent, the experience of the athletes, the coaches, sometimes health, intangibles. Can a team or an individual reach the limits of their capabilities? And can that team or individual then do it under pressure when it matters the most? Because I always say, if you can't do it when it matters, what's the point? I love doing this podcast because I like to talk about my 20 plus years of experience in working with some of the best performers, coaches, athletes, and leaders in the world. And whenever I get a chance to have a guest on, learn more from them about what has made them great, what are their challenges. So this is another one of my repeat guests. I met her when she was 12 or 13 years old. She remains the youngest person that I've ever worked with. She is now 17 years old, but boy, do we have a lot to update since the last few years. I'm not even really sure to begin, but this is what I can tell you just in the last few months. She made the U.S. Women's National Team for gymnastics. She won a silver medal in the all-around of the Pan American Games this past summer. She somehow made the U.S. Women's National Team top 8 and then made the top 6 and is now a gold medal winner from the World Championships that just took place in the last couple of months here for the U.S. Women's National Team in women's gymnastics. I don't even know what else to say, but welcome, Lexi Zeiss, to the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and be back with another podcast.
Well, last time we did it, you were 13 or 14 years old and you crushed it that day. But boy, life has changed dramatically for you since that time, just a natural progression of getting older. But in the world that you imagined, back when I talked to you when you were 12 or 13, you told me you were going to make the national team and a number of other goals that, I usually just say, well, that's awesome. I love that you have big goals. Most people don't actually reach those goals. And I know that for a long time, I've always told you only remind me of one other athlete that I've ever known. That's Jordan Larson in the volleyball world. And so there's so many similarities to you two. Why don't you try bringing us up to date a little bit? When we last visited, you were training in Papillion, Nebraska. Let's talk about that. You since moved gyms. Can you talk to me about the experiences at OGA with Kelly Green, your coach, and others? What foundation did that set for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think the big thing is they brought my love back to gymnastics. I went there kind of unhappy, not wanting to really do the sport anymore. And I got there and they really brought the love of the sport back to me. They gave me the fundamentals and helped me ultimately become an elite at the beginning. It was hard just because I was the only one there. It was me and only me. So obviously that's very hard to do at such a high level. And that's kind of why we decided to make the move. I felt like I needed a little more teammates and that just kind of hit the end of the runway. And I needed a little bit more. And to reach my dreams, I needed to make the move. And, it wasn't an easy decision at all because we loved OGA and we loved what we were doing there. But ultimately it was what was best for me. And I sat my parents down and I was like, guys, I think this is what we need to do if I really want to reach my dreams. And they were like, okay, let's do it. So, that's kind of how it went down.
Yeah, so you've already learned something about Lexi, right? She said she sat her parents down and said, this is what I think we need to do. And from the first day I met your parents and your parents always said this was about you and your dream. They were going to support it, but they weren't going to interfere other than what parents need to do at certain times, but they were going to let you kind of live this journey within reason. And so it's interesting that you say, you sat your parents down and said, I thought this out really long and hard. And for me to take the next step, despite all the benefits that you'd had at OGA, that it was time to go compete with some other athletes every day that were of similar talent, right? So you made the move to Twin City Twisters up in Minneapolis. I was very familiar with that gym just because so many great gymnasts came to the University of Nebraska with Coach Dan Kendig in the years I helped them. I mean, Cassandra Nathy, Jessie DeZiel, Holly Blansky, and I know there were others even before I came there, but like they were just, I love that gym for what they trained and how they trained it. Tell me about the move to Twin City Twisters and what were the challenges of moving there for you? And then let's talk a little bit about, your growth there.
Yeah, so the move was actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. The girls here, I already kind of knew, so that transition was really easy. I just felt like part of the team right away, and the coaches were amazing. I mean, there's 6 of them, so there's so many of them, and they all have their different strengths and work together to make us the best. And the family atmosphere at TCT is just unreal. You ultimately just like feel like every person has your back, and you have so many sisters around you, and it just, even though you're competing alone, it feels like you have a team with you at all times, and just feels so good. I mean, the video of me coming back from Worlds, it's just like my favorite video because it just shows like how much I mean to them and how much they mean to me. So I just feel like the team atmosphere here is unreal and just different than any other place. And obviously it was hard because just training was a little bit harder, and like just everything was, the training was different, and it was what I needed for sure because I've made so many huge strides this year, and couldn't thank them enough for everything they've done.
Tell me, what did you have to give up? Because you had to give up some things in your life to make a move as a 16-year-old to Minneapolis. It's a wonderful city, but your home, your family, your friends were in Omaha, Nebraska. Tell me about that, the challenges and the things that you had to give up to make this move.
Yeah, so obviously I'm from Nebraska. I'm originally from Omaha, so it was very hard. I went to public school at West Side. We loved West Side. They were great. Sorry. We loved West Side. They were great. But ultimately that's something I had to give up, and that was really hard because they worked so well with us, and I had so many friends there, and like just everybody supported me along that journey. So I definitely had to give up that part, and just none of my friends from home were up here, so you definitely have to give that up. And mostly just your normal teenage life you have to give up. I'm doing online school, and I don't really get to see a lot of my family very often, so you have to give up a lot, but it's very much worth it for what I've done and what I plan to do in the future.
Yeah, I just think sometimes people forget that there's a cost to being great, and there are things that a person has to sacrifice in order to be great, and it's not for everybody. But that's been your dream for a long time, and you've never really wavered from that, at least in the time I've known you. But I just think sometimes we forget that there's a cost. And so how have you been able to maintain some semblance of being a teenager, given the amount of training that you have to do wherever that may be in the United States?
Yeah, so TCT is very much a gym where it's like train smarter, not harder. And so we train less hours than a lot of other elites, but we're very efficient. We get a lot of stuff done in a short amount of time. So that does allow me to get home on the weekends pretty often. So it's only like a 40-minute flight, 5.5-hour drive. So I can usually get home pretty fast and get to go see my friends pretty often. So I'm definitely lucky to be able to do that. And that's what made it a little bit easier, is like there wasn't really any time for me to be homesick just because I was home almost every weekend. So my parents are really good about making sure I have a teenage life for sure.
Yeah, I love that. So before we talk about the growth of your mindset here just recently, can you put into words what you figured out that you had to work on in your mind, more, let's just say, from the ages of 13 to 16, in that initial stage of trying to get to become what we call an elite gymnast, right? There's, for people that aren't as familiar, there's most people in this country try to get to become a level 10 gymnast. That's the top level. So many of them get Division I scholarships. And then there's another level called elite, more training, against better competition, bigger skills. And then obviously the next level sort of is those elite gymnasts, or some of them, very few can make the national team. But can you talk about during your progression of trying really hard to become an elite gymnast and all that it went through, what did you have to improve with regarding mindset?
Yeah, definitely. This elite process at the beginning was very hard for me. I think it took me 6 or 7 tries to qualify elite, optional. I mean, you definitely remember that time. It was very hard on me. I wanted it so bad, and that's the best way to explain my mindset, was just wanted it so bad, and it hurt me along the way. And we had talked a lot, and ultimately we had decided at one meet we were just going to have fun because we didn't have anything to lose at this point, and that's the meet I did it at. So we as a team decided that that was going to be my focus for that year, and I think that focus has now continued through my gymnastics through the years, and it's all about having fun. And we as a team at TCT remind each other too on the floor, like, you're here to have fun. You don't do gymnastics just to put yourself under stress. You do it to have fun, and this is not the end of the world. Like, it's just gymnastics. So, like, have fun, be in the moment, cheer for your teammates, and just let what happened happen, because it's all about having fun. And that's definitely been a mindset change for me through the years.
Yeah. So if I'm watching you or somebody else is watching you, how do we know that Lexi Zeiss is having fun?
Yeah, I'm usually dancing with my teammates, or I'm smiling all the time, laughing with my coaches, and we're just having a good time out there and just enjoying what we're doing. The coaches are just like us too, like, they're smiling, having fun with us, because nobody wants to be stressed. Everybody wants to be having fun, and just know you're going to do your gymnastics normal.
Mm-hmm. So when we've talked about the 4 C's of an elite mindset before, the commitment part, the first one, that's sort of off the table at this point. We don't have to decide whether you're a committed athlete or not in all the different areas: physical, mental, technical, tactical. Of course, I say that's the foundation for being able to attack confidence and concentration and composure under stress. So you can't attack those other 3 if we don't have a foundation of commitment. You're as committed as an athlete as anybody I've ever met. Talk to me about those other 3. Where do you feel like you've made your biggest growth? Or comment on any of those that you feel: the confidence one, the concentration one, which is focus and refocus, and then composure, staying calm, cool, and collected under stress. Talk to me about those 3 C's and where you're at with those and how you've grown.
Yeah, so I think confidence-wise, the more experience I've had, the more confidence I've gotten. Pan Am's was a huge confidence booster for me. Doing so well there allowed me to do so well at at World Trials, and then therefore going to Worlds. So I think the better I did with my mental side and just competing better helped with my confidence. And just the focus side, I think at the gym we have music going, we're having fun, we're laughing, we're talking, but when it's your time, like, you get focused and you do what you got to do. So we're really good at switching that on and off, and we practice it in and out of the gym. So it's not any different for us at meets. So we can still act fun and have those silly times at the meets and still be able to find our focus and compete like we normally do. So that's a really helpful thing that we don't mean to practice, but we definitely do. So I think those 2 things have been key for me this year.
I love that. Okay, so Lexi, over the years, there weren't a lot of cracks. You mentioned the frustrations of, of what it takes, how gritty a person has to be, because when you're trying to become elite, especially at your age and with your relative lack of experience at that point, you had to fail a lot. And nobody likes to fail when you're a high-performing perfectionist. And you were failing at a very high level, but you weren't meeting the scores necessary, and you had to keep grinding and keep trying. But even during that time period, which you said was hard, there weren't a lot of cracks there. Mm-hmm. But I want to talk about last May for a minute. When we talked, there were a lot of things going on, and it was what I'd say was one of the first times I saw some cracks related to perfectionism with you. And so before you talk about it, I want to show you again a very short video that I played for you to kind of take us back to that moment so you can help describe what that video represented to you. And then we're going to talk about how you use it in a way with some strategies. So the video for the audience, I've shown this actually on another podcast before. Or certainly I've had Justine Wong-Orantes on my podcast, libero for the US Women's National Team, also a gold medal winner, but hers was in the Olympics, but still a gold medal winner. And she was crippled by perfectionism. About a year before the Olympics, she got cut from her top team. She decided to take a little break from her sport, decided to come back, worked her way back up and made the lineup for the Olympics, became the libero of the world. So from 1 year earlier, kind of crippled with perfectionism. But what you were sharing with me made me really think of her journey. And so I decided to show this to you that day. So I just want to play this for you and then have you comment on what you saw here. So would you have kind of a go-to statement or two that would be considered negative self-talk for you when you struggled with it?
It was more like, I need to be better. Like, why didn't you pass this ball? Or this needs to be perfect. I think it was more of this kind of expectation and always having to be perfect. And if I didn't meet that expectation, it was like, you know, the world was crashing down. And so I think it was more of that, more than kind of putting myself down. I mean, in a way it is putting me down, but it was just more like, why aren't you doing this? You should be able to do this. And so I think the sooner I got out of that mindset and the sooner that I realized, okay, I just need to be good. I don't need to be, and that's kind of what Karch always preaches, is just being good over a period of time. Instead of being, you know, excellent or spectacular, like you just need to stay consistent and, you know, everything else will kind of fall in.
Okay, so I'm going to just switch out of this here first for just a minute. And so I want you to take me back to Lexi, that time period. What was going on with you that was leading to what I would call a flare-up of our perfectionism? Because it's a topic that high-performing females struggle with a lot. Perfectionism. I always say that, one, we can't change your wiring, nor would we want to. It's what makes most high performers great, but there's can be a cost to it. Can you put into words what was going on with you? And let's talk about what you were experiencing, and then what were the costs of having a flare-up of perfectionism?
Yeah, so we had gone to Winter Cup, and obviously it did not go the way I planned. It was not a good meet for me, but I still had some good things that came out of it. And that's something you really worked with me on, is finding those positives. And I competed in a new vault and I got a 14. I was very excited about that. But I did have some hiccups on beam, and that kind of creeped into my mind a little bit. And we were doing show routines, this like just leading up to these next meets, and I just could not hit a beam routine. Like I just couldn't hit. I was so nervous when I was about to do it, and I would get up on the beam and be like, okay, you just have to do this exactly perfect and like be straight on, and like if you do this, then it's like over. Like it's like you can't mess up, or like it's over. And that was just like my mindset, and it never worked. And I kept falling, and it just wasn't working. Nothing was working for me. I was getting frustrated, and lots of just like not necessarily telling myself I wasn't good enough like Justine, but it was just putting myself in like, you have to do this to get this outcome, when it's not like that at all. So, you know, I had contacted you and told you I needed to talk, and you showed me that video, and I decided my motto was going to be good enough. So that's something I will use for the rest of my life, because it's definitely changed my life. My coach Sarah got in on it too, and you know, we decided to do a Sharpie on the wrist, and it was a GE. So, yep.
Can you see that right there?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that now. I found a couple of pictures of you. The middle one to the right was you looking down at your wrist, and that's what I wondered, like, what were you doing? And that's when I asked you, and I caught a picture of you and two pictures there of the little GEs on your wrist. Tell me about why you decided to put GE on your wrist and what has it done for you?
Yeah, so when I decided to start doing this, I decided I was going to write GE on my wrist so I could look down and say to myself, you just have to be good enough. You don't have to be perfect to have a good outcome. And that was what I really needed to hear from myself and from others too. So I wrote that on my wrist, and I also said to myself I wasn't going to use it in the gym. It was going to be for meet purposes only, just because I knew that's when I get to my most nerves. And so after we had talked, I decided to use the GE on my wrist for a week in the gym and just practice and see how I liked it. And it was a game changer for me. And so then I stopped using it. I was like, okay, we're not going to use it until I get in meets. And so Sarah, every time I'm about to compete, hugs me and says 2 words to me, good enough, walks away. And that's all I needed from my coach in those moments, were just to hear that I need to be good enough. And from that moment on, I used that up through my last competition, every meet I competed in, because I felt like it was so valuable to me, because it was getting me in the right mindset of calmness, but also knowing that no matter what happens, it was good enough and it was the best I could do in that moment.
I love that. So Lexi, let's talk about good enough for a minute, because it's one thing to say that we're good enough. It's another thing to know. I always say we still have to earn the right to know that we're good enough. And so where does that come from for you? Like, where do you get that confidence to know that I just need to be good enough and everything else will work out?
Yeah, I mean, our preparation in the gym, that's like the biggest thing. Is we do show routine after show routine after show routine. I mean, we'll turn the music off and every person in the gym will come stand there and they can't say a word and it's dead silent. You could drop a pin and people would hear it. But those show routines, knowing you can hit under that, then going to the meets, it's like, oh, this is easier than what we've practiced. So getting that confidence and then telling yourself it just has to be good enough. It doesn't even have to be your best, and it's still going to be good enough. So being able to do good enough under those hard circumstances, you can then go do even better than good enough at a meet, because it's an easier situation. So the preparation we go through to get to those meets is so amazing, and it just makes you feel good going into those meets. You're not scared of what if. There's never what ifs. It's, oh, I've done this routine 1,000 times. What's another one? And that's the thing too, is Sarah doesn't have to give us pep talks anymore. Like, there's not like, oh, be tight on this, be on tight on this. She's just like calming us down, like, oh, did you see the judge's shoes? Those are so pretty. Or like, oh my gosh, your leotard today, I love. Like, that's all she has to say to me. Like, it's nothing about gymnastics, and hugs me. It has to be a hug and a good enough, and then I'm there. So
Wow. Wow. I mean, it shows you the power of preparation. Now, I will say, Lexi, I know you said that, the competition then, it's just easier, but let's talk about when you made this transition with good enough, you started competing better, and you went down to train with the national team, as I understood it, more to just get experience. You had no expectations that you were going to make the Pan Am team. You weren't in the top 5 or 6 gymnasts in the United States in that moment of time. And you go down there and they have a competition that you participated in, and I believe you finished second in it. And then they had another mini competition the next day and you crushed it. And somehow they decided to take you as one of the members of the Pan Am Games, right? You've never been in an international competition. It's hard for me to imagine that when you got to the Pan Am Games, despite your training at Twin City Twisters, that it just felt like another competition. Is that true? I mean, when you got there, did it really feel like just another competition at the Pan Am Games?
I will say qualifications did feel like that, but finals was completely different, because qualifications, it was like 7:45 in the morning in Brazil. So there was not very many people there, and it was just our little team. And obviously I did feel a little bit more pressure walking into the arena, because you look down and you're like, oh, there's a flag on my arm. Like, this is my country. And that's a big thing for a 16-year-old to like have to experience. And I had great mentors around me, and Sarah's obviously done this before. So I had lots of help along the way, but I will not lie to you. I felt like I was going to pass out on day 2 before beam. And I told you that.
Mhm.
I was like, Kayla fell on beam, and I was like looking for the nearest exit, because I was like, I don't know if I can do this right now, because I was like feeling the nerves. And Sarah knew exactly what I needed. I knew what I needed for myself, and I did good enough. It was not my best routine, but I did good enough, and I put up the highest score for Team USA on beam. So yeah, you're definitely going to feel the nerves, and if you don't feel the nerves, you don't care. So they're always going to be there.
Mhm. So backtrack just a little bit, just so maybe we can help others who might feel a burst of nerves in any situation. But in this case, you also had a teammate fall. That happens in sport. And it does put a little bit more pressure on you. Just that's the nature of gymnastics. When you felt like running for the exit, you said you had some strategies and your coach had some strategies for you. What were those that helped get our nervous system more in line of where you needed it to be?
Yeah, definitely breathing, hand on the stomach, finding, because you can usually feel your heartbeat in those moments. You can feel it going, and you can feel it through your whole body, and that's not something enjoyable. So getting that settled and doing what I needed to do, staying warm, talking to my teammates about not gymnastics, and taking in the crowd was a big thing too. The crowd was incredible on day 2, and taking that energy and changing my nerves into their energy was something that I thought was amazing too. They were loud, and I definitely embraced it, even though it wasn't necessarily for the US. I pretended it was, and I took it and let it take me through the beam routine. But I definitely kept my eyes on Sarah the whole time, getting ready to salute, just looking at her, talking to her. Not about gymnastics though, for sure, but just not looking around, keeping my eyes on Sarah, and just having a normal conversation that we would at the gym. But yeah, I definitely had a high pulse on that one.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, we've talking about our second ingredient of confidence, your own self-talk, your own resets. And then our third ingredient of confidence, what our teammates and coaches can do for us when we're stressed. They both came into play. The other concept that I think is so important that I talk about a lot is what I say awareness and strategy. You have to have awareness first that you're a little more hyped up than usual. In your case, like you said, when you feel your heart pounding out of your chest, that's an easy one to recognize. But it's too late if, say, you didn't have a beam routine at all close and you got off and go, wow, I was so nervous, I must have been. And then you didn't have awareness first, so that you could actually strategize. Because if you don't have the strategy, you're in trouble too. And you've always been somebody who's put your hand on your stomach and really worked on your deep breathing. And that, you put into words what that does for you when you only have a few seconds to a minute to get our nervous system a little bit closer to where it needs to be, even though like you said, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. Well, I think a fun thing to look back on for me is to look at my routine from last year, and I'll salute to the judge, and I'm immediately on the equipment. And now, like, you get 30 to 45 seconds depending on the event to get on the event. So I'll stand there, and I won't go until I know I'm ready. I'll salute, put my hand on my stomach, and if I feel my heart going, like, take the extra 5 seconds and stand there and get it back to where you want it to be before you go, because you have the time. So get to the spot you want it to be and go. And that's right before championships. As a team, that was our motto for championships, was like every time we would do a routine, that your teammate, we each had our person we needed on each event, and they would just come over and be like, don't go until you're ready. Don't let anyone pressure you into going. So the judges turn on their green light. They don't get to decide when you go, you do. And even though the green light's on, you get 30 seconds. So you don't go on their time, you go on yours. And I think that was a good thing for me too, because if I feel the nerves, I then have 30 seconds to collect myself and find where I need to be before I go.
Wow. Not a surprise that you learned to take control of the situation, right? But isn't that cool though? I mean, when you really think, for people listening, when you want to take it up a notch wherever you are performance wise, to be able to adapt and adjust. And like you said, if I take my normal breaths and I'm not quite ready to go and I have enough awareness that I need to do a little bit more, I take my time and do it on my time, within the rules. And then I have a very good sense of awareness of when I'm ready to go. And so it probably isn't a surprise. I mean, I'm not sure. I think you were perfect in your routines in terms of staying on the apparatus at the Pan Am Games, at the World Trials. And there was one other meet too, I think you were at before that, because as they keep going down, right? So, but you have this ability to stay on under pressure. So, before we talk about the World Championships for a minute, because you had a very different role, even though you were extremely excited and honored to be there. You know, we talk about a couple other ingredients of confidence. We talked about number one, preparation, hard work, talk about our self-talk or our resets, what our teammates and coaches do for us is our third ingredient. Do you do anything for the fourth ingredient of confidence, which I talked about as past success helps us with confidence, but Jordan Larson will watch a highlight reel of herself to help her remind herself of what she was thinking and feeling when she was at her best. She does it all the time now. She used to only do it after she maybe underperformed, but had to be confident the next day. Anything you do for that fourth ingredient of confidence to help you stay confident?
Yeah, not even in competition season. Like every night before I go to bed, I watch something I did good today. Like you're going to do something good every day. So I caught a new release yesterday. So last night I watched it like 4 or 5 times. But I love to go back and watch my old videos. Like I'm a gymnast junkie. Like I love to watch gymnastics. It's all I do in life. So I will go back and watch my videos from World Trials and like just like watch myself and be like, okay, like how was this for you? Like this wasn't your best routine, but how did you do under pressure? And just to watch myself be able to handle those moments and not feel the nerves and just watch from the outside is pretty cool because you don't get to normally do that. So I definitely watched lots of videos, and I like to watch other people too and just see like how do I compare, as like do I look like myself out there, and like am I being who I want to be out there?
Okay. Is there ever a danger for you when you watch others that you compare yourself in an unhealthy way, or have you worked through that?
No, I don't think in an unhealthy way. I think in a competitive way, maybe. At Worlds, I am pretty good at math, so I can add up stuff in my head pretty quick. But sometimes that cannot be helpful. But I've learned to do it at certain moments and when it's not probably the best thing. But I'm definitely a score watcher, and I like to be competitive. So I like to look over my shoulder and be like, oh, she got a 13. I'm going to get a 13-1. Like that type of competitiveness also helps me competing, just because it's like you're in that mode of like, oh yeah, like let's go, instead of being like, oh no, so there's a difference between those two things, and I definitely like to feel the aggressive like let's go feeling.
Oh, I love that. Let's go versus oh no. That's a mindset that we can train like any physical skill, right? And that is rooted in positive psychology, which is what you just said, which is you catch yourself doing things right, watch them on video, and you find the things that you do well and watch them. And it's not bragging, it helps you stay in the right mindset so that we can have this let's go mentality under pressure versus oh no. So I talk about grit. Obviously, grit is somebody who's got a lot of perseverance and passion. I mean, we could put your picture by grit, honestly, but I tell people in the grit world that there's a word called hope. And hope to me in the grit world means because of my attitude and effort and my preparation, and because I know my teammates and coaches have my back, I truly believe what's about to happen is going to be great. So I actually believe let's go here. Maybe that wasn't my best routine. The next one's going to be let's go instead of uh-oh. Talk to me about that concept of hope and believing that what's about to happen is going to be great. Is that a mindset that you have developed and enhanced over the last couple of years?
For sure. I think obviously, like you talked about, getting confidence from doing what you've done and finding the mindset that you had there, then giving you hope that it's going to do the same thing. And having that same feeling for sure. And I think another thing too is like landing your routine and knowing that that was the best you could have done in that moment, and that feeling you have is like, you got to celebrate that. Like if you watch back some of my videos recently, I'll like clap or like hug my coach really hard, just because it's like I did that under pressure and I did what I could have done, and I took control of the situation. And I think that's hard. Like that's a hard concept to do. So being excited about what you do is also fun. Like you don't see gymnasts celebrating very often, but you're starting to see that change a little bit, and like be excited about what you're doing, and just clapping and yelling, being like, yeah, like let's go. And like being excited is just a big thing, and having that hope before your routine, but also after. Like I felt that.
Mm-hmm. And I call it can't be false hope. It has to be earned. There's one more set of people that I say also can give us hope, and it's tied into also our fifth ingredient of confidence. So I've got to talk about them. Your parents.
Yeah.
That's something we've talked about over the years, about how they can help your confidence, or there's things that they've ever done to hurt your confidence. Nobody as a parent wants to hurt their kid's confidence in any sport at any level, but oftentimes what a parent thinks is helping may not be helping. Could you give an example of something that mom or dad did at any point in your career that actually added pressure or stress to you? And then let's talk about how they've grown and evolved to be people in your life that not only support you in tremendous ways, but actually give you hope and confidence.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm an only child, so I have that connection to my parents like quite a bit. I'm around them all the time. So as a younger kid, I think I was just very a people pleaser, wanted to do it so bad for them and like do it for them. But it took me a while to realize like they're not in this for them, they're in this for me. So it needs to be like, do it for me and nobody else. And that took me a while to do, because I'm very much a people pleaser in this world. I want to make everybody happy. I just want everybody to be happy. And I know it's not going to be like that all the time, but the most important thing is for me to be happy. And so I think over time it's done just great things for me to change that perspective, because I don't think they've ever done anything to make me nervous. It's more me making myself nervous with them. Like, does that make sense? Like just looking up at them being like, I want to do good for them. And that's never what their intent was. Like they never wanted to be like that, because they're in this for me. They've never been in it for themselves. And that's also something I commend them on, because a lot of people put their kids in this stuff to just force them to do it for their own dream. But this has never been their dream. It's always been mine. And they've sacrificed so much for it. And yeah, I definitely love them being at my meets. I mean, they went to Rio and they went to England, even though I didn't end up competing, and they were there for 2 weeks. So, I mean, they go everywhere with me.
Is your dad able to watch you compete?
Yes, he can do it now. Yeah, in Brazil, it was actually funny because team finals day, he got stuck in a crowd, right? So if the beam's this way, he got stuck in a crowd, like on the end of the beam when I was competing, and he couldn't get out. And he was just freaking out because I was very, very crooked on my beam series. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know how I stayed on that beam with minimal deductions. And he thought, he was watching, he thought I fell off and got back on before he even looked over, because he closed his eyes because I was so crooked. And he opened his eyes and I was there, and he thought I had fallen, but I really hadn't, of course. But yeah, he can watch now. And I was like, that's the worst spot to be in. So he's doing better. My mom was like, if we're flying to Brazil, you're watching the events. And he was like, okay, fair. Fair
enough. All right. So let's talk about the World Championships. Obviously, even that was a goal that might have been far-fetched a few months ago, to actually make the final world team when you started including all the gymnasts of the world now. I mean, in the US, we're competing and they only took 6, right? And I want you to tell me about how you were able to manage your nerves at the world trials. And then I want to talk about the world championships, where your role was very different. So world trials, how did you do it?
Yeah, so I'll kind of like talk about the lead up too is, so Sarah comes in one day and she looks at me and she's like, hey, you got invited to world trials. She's like, this is your choice. She was like, I want you to decide what you want to do. It's going to be hard, 6 weeks of training, like getting these new skills in that we want to do. And just like, it's going to be hard. And she's like, I want you to decide. You take a few days, decide what you want to do. And like, I don't want you to feel pressured at all. I want you to do what you want to do. And like, here's your options. And I looked at her and I was like, I don't need 3 days. Like, let's do this. And she was like, all right. So we sat down, figured out a plan, and, you know, we had big upgrades ready to go for these meets. And then we realized, like, we looked at this and we were like, okay, like, we can do this. Like, we can be on this team. And so Sarah was like, okay, we're pulling out every upgrade you've done. You're doing the same routines you did at championships. And you're going to feel so confident on these routines because it's the routines you've competed all year. And we're just going to maximize the scores you have and the routines you have. And that was just so good for my confidence because I knew going into that meet I could hit that routine under pressure any day, anytime, because I had done it all year. So obviously getting to the world trials, I had nothing to lose. That was like our motto of the time we were there. Like, I have nothing to lose. Like, I'm here. My goal was to get invited to a national team camp this year. I'm on national team. I went to Pan Am's. I mean, I've achieved more than I could have dreamed of this year, and I got invited to world trials. Like, I didn't even think that would be on the card. So to even be there was just crazy. So we just had fun. I mean, I had 2 coaches with me, so it was me and 2 coaches, and we had practice in the gym what we were going to do, and we have this little Power Rangers thing that we do because it's like Power Rangers, like, let's go. And we had to do it before everything, and just, you know, those little things that just make that competing a little bit more fun and less stressful. And I'm not going to say I wasn't nervous, but there was that little bit of whatever happens. Like, you can't, we always say too, like, you can't control what's about to happen because it's already done. Like, you've done your preparation, and whatever is about to happen, you can't change that. So focus on the things you can change, like having fun and changing your mindset. But yeah, I would say it was just a fun competition just because I knew what I was trying to do. Like, I was there to go to world championships. No matter if I made the team or not, it was going to be just an unreal experience.
What was your feeling when you realized you made the US national team to head to the world championships?
Yeah, so I ended up in 6th day 1, and I knew day 2 I had to pull out big routines. Like, I knew that, so obviously the nerves were high day 2. I felt like I was gonna throw up before I left for the meet. Like, I won't like sugarcoat anything. Like, I was so nervous, it's not even funny. And I got there and I was like, you know what? You just proved that you're one of the top 6 gymnasts in the country right now. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you've proved to yourself what you can do. So I went in and I did better routines on bars and beam. Like, I was just so much better day 2. And we called me icy that whole week because I was just going to be ice cold. And so in the gym, they like to call me Spicy Zeissy. So we changed it to icy for the whole week just to be like ice cold. And I went in there and I was ice cold, and I finished in 6th day 2 also. And, you know, I didn't know what they were going to do. It was a little different situation than Pan Am's because Pan Am's I had finished 2nd both days. So I kind of had a feeling I was on that team. But for Worlds, I had no idea. Like, I was sitting there, I couldn't eat dinner. I was texting my mom all night. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just sitting here for 3 more hours until they make the decision. And I was very frantic. Like, I just didn't know what to do because it wasn't like a clear decision. There wasn't like a clear decision. So I was very nervous. So sitting in that room waiting for them to talk, I was like, felt like it was years and years going by. I was like, okay.
Why do you think they took you?
I think I brought the team atmosphere that they almost didn't have on the team. I love to have fun. I love to cheer. I feel like I'm a good teammate, and I feel like the TCT atmosphere has prepared us for those things. So definitely the teammate atmosphere I bring to the team, I think.
You had a completely different role. As you said, you didn't compete. You were an alternate. You had to be ready to go every day. How did you get your mind and body ready to go in case you were called upon, which could easily happen in gymnastics?
Yeah, so I mean, I just pretended like I was doing it with them because ultimately there were 6 of us and they were taking 5 and they really hadn't told us the lineups or anything, and I could have snuck into those things. So I had to do the same numbers everybody else did, the same things everybody else did, even when they were competing. Like I had to warm up in the back and be ready to go. So I did everything they did, so I just had to be in the same mental state they were. So the only difference was I didn't get to compete in front of the crowd, but I did get to do stuff in the back and be ready for those situations and like be around all those Olympians and everything around us and just get that atmosphere without competing. But I definitely brought the energy and the cheering and the teammate side of things when competing. And I walked up to all of them before they competed and asked them what they needed from me through this whole competition, because that was my job and my job was to do what they needed. And so I had things that I needed to do for everyone and to make them successful and make us successful as a team. I brought extra clothes and I had heat warmers and just making sure everybody had what they needed, and also making sure I was ready in case I needed to be thrown up there. So it was just definitely different position I had been in, but I wouldn't have changed it. I mean, it was such a cool experience, and I was definitely part of the team still. And like I had being part of the team, I still had to do everything everybody else did, and I feel like they were just as inclusive with me as everyone else and made me just as part of the team as everyone else.
I just think that's fascinating because you had dual roles. You were a key in the third ingredient of confidence for your team. Like you had roles for every one of them, what you needed to do, and you still had to have your mindset ready to go and train and be ready. It's just incredible to me. All right. Where do we go from here? I mean, like you said, this is about the most amazing year. You couldn't have predicted it. What do you see in your future?
Yeah, so when I got back from Worlds, I flew to Omaha and I took like a full week off. I just got back to the time zone, saw my friends, saw my family, and just took a week. And I think Sarah took 4 or 5 days off too. We just needed it. Like season had been so long because we had to qualify elite. Weren't even qualified elite at the beginning of the year. So we were competing around this time last year. So I almost competed a full 12 months, which is just crazy. But yeah, so I just took a week off. I rested and I came back and we started basics for a week. And so now we're working upgrades. We're getting those upgrades into routines. I got a new floor routine that I'm excited to show. And so we got some new stuff cooking up, but definitely just taking time slow and working these new upgrades and just getting back in routine shape within the next month, probably, because we have national team camp at the end of January and then winter cup at the end of February. So January got to be able to do like half routines, and then February we'll be competing full routines. So just trying to get that plan set up with Sarah, and each girl has their individual plan just to get to that point and find where they're going to be the best at that point.
So last question for me. So you just mentioned, because we're trying to find inches here, right? I mean, if we're being honest, like at this level, we have to find an inch here, an inch there. You mentioned you're going to be working on some upgrades and some other things there. Those are all inches.
Yep.
Try to put into words one mental skill that you've worked on that you've been working on that you're going to do a little bit better than ever in the coming year. Even if you've done it great already, you're going to do it even a little bit better.
Yeah. Just continuing the good enough, because it was such a key point in my gymnastics this year. It was just as important as my gymnastics and as my practice. So I think continuing that and knowing what worked for me and continuing that through, because if we know that worked, then keeping it like that, I'm just going to continue to grow.
Okay, I love it. It's one of my favorite, honestly, comparison stories of how two athletes from two very different sports with very similar mindsets. It's the first time I can say that's probably happened in my career as well, where I felt that an athlete in another sport was very similar to you. And I will just say that a couple of times I've written Justine and I've said to her, I've updated her with what you've done, and I said, boy, the video that she watched really had an impact on on her and her performances. So Justine would always write me back with
She's incredible.
all kinds of emojis that I never quite understood what they meant, but they looked happy. And
Yeah.
but
She's incredible. She's definitely a great role model for me. And she's been one of my favorite volleyball players, her and Jordan, just being from Nebraska and stuff. So she's definitely a huge role model.
isn't that cool? Tell me how you're similar to Jordan Larson. I do have one more question. In your opinion, how are you similar to Jordan Larson?
I would say we have that determination mentality and that always continuing to grow no matter if you're already succeeding, you want to even do better, and never letting someone else tell you can't do something, and just beating out the haters for sure.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I would say that is so true. And I would add one other piece. There is a sacrifice to being great at your level. And Jordan made decisions to sacrifice certain things in her life to reach the goals that she had, including going to Nebraska and being on the Olympic team. And you've had similar goals of what you want to accomplish, and then there's sacrifice that goes along with that, and you're okay with it. And so that's one other piece I would say that's very similar to Jordan's mindset. And it's amazing that I know both of you. So I'm very blessed to watch you on this journey. I mean, I have to remind people you're only 17, because when we talk this whole time, you know, you keep hearing a 30-year-old kind of mature. But when
Yeah,
you're
I turned 17 at
21.
Worlds.
Wow. Wow. All right. So I've asked you a ton of questions. Do you have anything else you want to share before we end today?
I don't think so. I mean, my 17th birthday was in England, so when I was at Worlds, that was a pretty cool birthday. And I would just add to Worlds too, like it was so cool to be around them because all 5 of the girls on my team were at Olympic trials last year, 2 years ago, whenever that was. But it's just crazy that I was around them because I remember last year being like, oh my gosh, these girls are so cool and like so good, and they're vying for an Olympic spot. So it was cool to be around them, and just what an experience it was.
Wow. Well, your dream's still alive, isn't it? That you told me about when you were 12. You'd love to find your way to the Olympics one day, and that dream's still out there for you. So keep doing what you're doing. I've always said the one thing I said that matters the most is as long as you don't lose your joy for your sport, you're going to be fine. And that's always been the key to me since I understood the way you were wired and the way you think, that joy for you is the one ingredient, and then everything else can follow from there. So don't lose your joy, Lexi. And thank you again for being on this.
Thank you
again, because boy, I mean, as great as you were a couple of years ago, I mean, it's just a completely different stage of life and what you've accomplished and how you've grown. So it's going to be really helpful to a lot of the high performers in my audience to hear how you've grown and what you've really had to do to be great, because it's not easy.
For sure. Thank you so much, and thanks for everything you've done for me.
You got it, Lexi. Thank you.